up, we are going to welcome our next speaker, Camilo Andrade, who is the Global Vice President of Nike Football at Nike. Camilo is responsible for creating brand demand across all of North America. He also previously served in senior marketing roles at Red Bull, L'Oreal, and Nestle. And Camilo, I did cover off with Geoff before we got started that it is soccer and not football for the Americans, so we cleared that up. And my WPP colleague, Geoff Northcott, who is the Managing Partner and Chief Experience Officer at AKQA. Geoff was fortunate enough to start his career at AKQA, working on Nike 13 years ago. AKQA has actually partnered with Nike for over 20 years now. So during this time, they've developed services like the Nike Training Club, programs such as Nike Rise, The Chance, and campaigns such as Believe. So thrilled to be introducing you both to this next session. So take it away, Geoff and Camilo.
Thanks so much, Kyla. And Camilo, great to reconnect, man. I'm looking forward to chatting with you. One of the things that struck me when we first met and talking about your history and your background, so you've been at companies like Nike and Red Bull for over a decade now. But before that, and this is common to a lot of the people that I met over my time at Nike, is they've got backgrounds in sport. I think Red Bull's the same way. It's like, and what was no different with you, you were a national champion water skier, which is an amazing sort of fact. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and I think what you learned from sport and what that you took into your career, all the sort of values and behaviors that you took into your role today?
Sure. First, Geoff, let me just say that I'm thrilled to be here, and thanks, Kyla, for the generous introduction. It's actually a funny time, right? I wish I would be in front of the people that are listening, but it's definitely a time that is teaching us a lot. So I just wanted to thank you for the introduction, the opportunity to be here in front of you guys, and hopefully this is a useful conversation for all of you guys. I don't want to make this about me, so we'll try to make that happen. So in that regard, and a good segue to your question, Geoff, is I think sport it's somehow the greatest platform for education. I'm extremely thankful that my parents brought me into sport early on, because to your question, Geoff, sport taught me so many things that I still use on my everyday life, and one of those is discipline, right? I grew up in sports that were individual sports, so although I didn't, let's say, benefit from the team culture and all that, I did benefit from the discipline that you need, right? I was a self-made athlete in a sport that was not necessarily very participated in my country, in Colombia. So I had to learn sometimes by falling too many times, and I had to learn the value of resilience, of perseverance, and really just not quitting. So today, I think that's one of the biggest things that has put me through so many different and challenging situations in different companies, in different environments like what we're living this year, right? A massive pandemic, racial injustice, of course, restructures of so many companies. So no one teaches you how to lead or how to be a marketer or a finance person in this context. So I think sport has definitely given me that resilience, the discipline, and the belief that anything is possible if you put your mind and the hard work into it.
It's great points. And the thing that struck me too as you were talking is the other thing that I'm sure comes, especially as an individual athlete, is like that always pushing for the next benchmark, right? Like you're always trying to beat your personal best and try and move forward and move forward and move forward. And it's such the same at Red Bull and at Nike and all these leading companies. It's like never satisfied, right? Like never rest on your laurels and never sort of never rest for a second, right? It's always about that next thing.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's one thing I've always used for personal growth. Is it's funny that we spend so much of our time as professionals trying to please either our bosses or managers or the leadership of a company, And we forget that one of the most valuable things we can do is work on ourselves and work on our strengths. If you think about athletes, they are very aware of their blind spots, and they're very aware of their technical skills and their strengths. And they spend a lot of time with their coaches working on their strengths, working on maximizing their strengths so they can actually turn them into their secret weapons or their biggest, let's say, their biggest pillars when it comes to competing. And I think that that's a big learning that I've taken from sports and that I try to implement across my teams, and I really use it as part of my leadership identity. Is really coach on strengths, is make people aware of their strengths and work on those instead of really trying to, in a way, diminish weaknesses.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And that's, again, it's that idea of like standing out and being distinctive and being, it's rather than being average across the board, it's like, where can you really spike up and where can you really stand out and be the best in something, right? Like it's like in any of the sports is like, you can't be the best at everything, right? You're not going to gold medal in every category. That's interesting insight. So I want to talk a little bit about brand purpose, because because it's a lot in the, people are talking about a lot. It's a big topic at the moment, in even bubbling up to out of marketing and into corporate culture. But also because Red Bull and Nike in particular have two of my favorite brand purposes. I've referenced them both for years in presentations. Red Bull, the idea of giving you wings. And what struck me always is the idea of a drinks brand, that like having a purpose that's so elevated from that, right? It's got a much more higher level aspirational purpose. And then Nike, one of my favorite all time, innovation and inspiration for every athlete in the world, helping people reach their potential through the power of sport. And both of those purposes don't say anything about product. They don't say anything about sales or, marketing goals. They're very, the epitome of purpose. So tell me a bit about how you think about brand purpose and, how companies can use them successfully and authentically and effectively.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the most exciting topics for me personally. I'll start by using maybe an analogy in life. Is I think purpose is one of the most important things to have in life, right? And then before moving into brands, is we all have purpose in life, right? And whether it's you becoming a parent and really leaving a legacy through your family, your kids, and making sure that you set them up for success and help them realize their dreams, that is purpose, right? It's just that we don't go and we don't advertise it to the world. And I think in a moment where in life we're faced with all these social channels and people are so in a way concerned about their image. In a way, I assimilate that that's marketing, right? And how much effort we put into it and how much purpose we have will end up deviating our message into the world. But not to deviate from the question, and if you take that into brands, I think that having a strong, let's say, idea and having clarity on what's your mission as a brand, as a company, it's extremely important. In grounding that mission in something that is bigger than just a moment, it's even more important, right? And it's funny because you talk about those statements from Red Bull and Nike, and for me, they are the reason why I joined those companies. I didn't join Red Bull or Nike because of, in a way, the products they did, and I love those things. But after working pretty much 10 years in the cosmetics industry, I realized I was missing passion and I was missing the opportunity to work for a company that had such a strong alignment between their mission and what they did every day. So it is extremely important. I think that having a strong mission, and I think there's a distinction between mission and purpose, because if you have a strong mission, you then can double click and really reinforce your purpose and your reason of existence. I think when you think about Red Bull and Nike, those things that you mentioned, those statements are the mission and somehow the reason of existence that transcends years, months, athletes, or products, right? And that dictates their strategies, dictates somehow how they think about their long-term existence. And then the purpose is something that can start to transcend into something more useful and meaningful for their impact in society and, of course, the environment they operate in. And I think for us as a company today, Nike, it's been one of the greatest things is marrying how our mission started to actually dictate clearly what should be the impact that we immediately had in the world and in society. And honestly, we are extremely lucky to work in the sport industry because sport itself can move the world forward, right? Sport gives hope, gives joy to so many people around the world, is the one thing that unites. And I think that that's why maybe our mission has been so right for so many years. I think the moment that Bill Bowerman and Phil Knight dreamed of this statement, that became really an ethos that has guided us for so many years and will continue. It's amazing. And the same thing for Red Bull. But the thing that makes it special is the fact that you need to make sure that that statement comes through life every day, through every person, through every product, through every single dimension of your company and your brand, right? And from Red Bull to Nike, I've seen that, and that's why I continue to admire Red Bull and love that brand so much, is because they do give wings to every athlete around the world every day, in the same way that we bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete around the world in Nike.
And it's interesting you say that, like, because one of the things that has struck me over the years is Nike produces, Red Bull as well, and a crazy diversity of marketing activities, right? Like in all sorts of different categories, different events, different activations. Like the diversity is incredible, but it's all, you immediately feel it's all on brand. Like it's all coming from a consistent place, right? And I used to have this with when have someone, a new creative, join the team, and immediately they would go to ideas that immediately you're just like, man, like that's not on brand, right? Like, they do propose something like a score tracking app. It's like, you can't, that's got nothing to do with helping athletes get better. So it's like, that's not on brand, right? Like but it's really interesting how it gets internalized and how powerful that is to have that clarity and the singularity of that mission. Because it gives everyone, the entire organization, power to go and activate that in so many imaginative, interesting ways. And I think one of the things it does, segueing on to the next question, allow or at least encourage is the sort of boldness and risk-taking and creativity, which is something, again, both those two brands in particular are so famous for. And I know that you've had the experience of working on a couple like all-time famous, bold activations, the first being Stratos at Red Bull, which is the famous jump from the edge of space that literally captured the world's attention, was on every news outlet, like everyone in the world saw that. And then also you're part of the sub-2 marathon attempt that was just ran, and it was one of the biggest sport moments in all time. It's like it's like it transcends all of from a marketing, it becomes part of culture. Like it's a historic event. The idea that's a sub-2 marathon attempt, and how that sort of innovation, the importance of innovation, boldness, and risk-taking. How do you think about that when you think about cutting through, and these days in the success of campaigns, the pressure that's put on for results? How do you think about the importance of boldness and risk-taking when it comes to creativity?
I think it's incredibly important, and I think it's incredibly important because it's what's, in a way, been fueling evolution, human evolution. And I'm gonna walk us a couple of steps back before getting into the Red Bull and the Nike example. If you think about evolution and how we've come up with great inventions like the airplane, it's all about bold and risk-taking moves from people that believe in their potential to create change, right? If you think about the Wright brothers, they were bold. They were extremely risk takers that believed in their idea. And going back to the idea of strengths and coaching on strengths, those guys knew that they were right. They knew that it was possible. And they believed that they've done everything that they needed from a calculation standpoint. And then it was all about putting the hard work and being bold and not being afraid of just the potential outcomes, and more focus on the potential game-changing solutions that they were going to bring. Take that to the modern era, and you think about sports. One of the things that really fascinates me is how athletes push the edges, right? And I grew up in the action sports industry, and of course, water skiing being one of my entry points. But I've studied so many different athletes, and there are great books that have done that as well, in how extreme athletes have pushed the edges of sports in a more accelerated way than traditional sports. And it's because of exactly the idea of boldness, risk-taking, and the fact that when those athletes rely on their strengths to actually survive, then you can actually push the edges of sport way faster. Of course, the consequences are way bigger, right? And this is, for me, what happened with Red Bull Stratos. Felix Baumgartner, he was one of the best base jumpers of all time, right? No one knew him, but at the time, he did everything. He'd jump out of antennas, out of bridges, out of cliffs. We actually brought him to Mexico to jump out of the top of some of the biggest buildings, which honestly, for a base jump, they're extremely small, but the risk it's tremendous. And to your point of storytelling, how important is basically risk-taking in storytelling? It's tremendous. It's super important because you rely on the confidence of the athlete or the confidence of the person to actually push the edges so that we can actually find the right narrative. And Red Bull Stratos was that. It was Felix's ambition to break Joe Kittinger's record from 1959, and he believed in his capacity to do it. And I'm just gonna correct you on something. The fact that I worked on those things, I was actually lucky to be part of a company that was fueling some of those projects, because it was by no means one man's job. This was a team effort. And neither Felix or Eliud Kipchoge would have been able to do what they did without the support of a massive team that had one thing in common, and that was belief. The belief that the athlete could do it.
And the willingness to have it not work. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's the thing that I find amazing, is like the courage that it takes to say, you know, we don't actually know. Not in control of the outcome, because it's not pre-scripted. It's not, you know, something that's been shot and it's being shown on TV that was like, this is a real thing that's happening. And it's just why people love the drama of sport, right? Because we don't know what the outcome is, and so you tune in to see what's going to happen. And I think most companies are really, really uncomfortable with that lack of control. And so, and to the point where it's like, I see with a lot of companies, to the degree where control is down to, you get a briefing form where it's like the answer is already a 30-second spot and a couple of adapts, and you're kind of like, man, like it's so restricted, like the idea of what the outcome is. Where here it's like, I think that idea of risk and lack of control and uncertainty, where I look at so much of the great work from Nike, Red Bull, and others, is like, so much of it is about the idea and the power of that idea and the possibility of it, and then figuring out the right way to express it and realize it. And could be, you know, so how do you give people that culture and permission to think outside of that box and to take that risk in the first place?
Well, I think, Geoff, you need to open space for failure. And I want to remind the audience, and I'm sure that there's people here in the audience that have worked with Red Bull or still work, but what people don't remember is that we did fail in both those projects. Red Bull Stratos was a project that was 7 years in the making. And of course, when I say failed, we failed in the eyes of a lot of people, right? Felix Baumgartner, he walked away from the project. He had a panic attack at some moment and he walked away. And Red Bull had a tremendous team of athlete performance coaches that actually had to work through the problem. And Felix had to work through the problem. He had to overcome so many fears. And this is actually there's a great documentary that at the time we worked on National Geographic, and you can actually see the whole process behind it. But we failed multiple times. Even before the launch in 2012, there were 3 windows to actually make it happen. And we failed in the first 2 windows because of wind and conditions. We had 3 balloons. 2 of them got ripped and destroyed by the wind. And we had one last window. And there was so much anxiety by that moment, because you can imagine the anxiety that builds up for 7 years, right? The anxiety that the athlete has gone through. right? The pressure at this time, this has been globally advertised. Everyone's eyes are on Felix. But where I go with this is open the space for failure. I think failure can be the biggest fuel of success if you allow it, and if you actually build an agility around it, which is what we call today in today's world, the learning agility that comes from failing. And the same thing happened in breaking too. If you guys think about it, in the eyes of a lot of people, we failed. Eliud Kipchoge didn't break the sub 2-hour marathon in the first attempt, right? But it was actually a great success because it showed the world the potential that humans have. It was actually even better that he came short by 24 seconds because he actually made everyone realize that it is possible and that it was possible, which eventually turned out in him running the sub 2-hour marathon and crushing it. So that is space for failure and channeling it in a right direction to make sure that teams around any project, around any brand, develop the learning agility to actually iterate faster and end up coming with a solution. It's what happened to the Wright brothers. They failed multiple times. They crashed. They destroyed prototypes. But eventually, they used all those failures to build up towards a perfect prototype that ended up flying.
I think that's exactly. I love that sort of analogy of, and it's so true in all innovation, where it's like the failures are what teach you and give you the knowledge and learning to then get it right. And I know I tell one of the other stories I tell about Nike is the fact that no one knows or remembers that they had, before Nike Plus was launched, they had a partnership with Philips where it's like a hardware tracker where you could run and it recorded your runs, and they didn't really do anything other than that. It played some, I think it had 200 song capacity or something, and told you how much fast you're running. And then we had actually built a site where you could track your runs manually, and sort of like a little website where you could track in your runs. But really, Nike Plus is the fusion of those two things. No one remembers those previous ones. And in a sense, you could say they were failures, but in a way, they led to one of the biggest breakthroughs, in marketing commercial history, in a way, with Nike Plus. So it's like all those experiments leading to something. And I think companies like Nike and Red Bull are so good at that, testing things, trying things. And as you say, even though it didn't break the sub 2 record, it still captured the world's imagination, and it also showed just how hard it was. Like, it's a real thing. So tell me a bit about, speaking of, like, both of those things are, like, a lot of what Nike and Red Bull do are invest in what I would say brand building over time. There's a lot of effort that goes into not just direct performance marketing, right? Like, not direct response marketing. A lot of it is in true brand building. And I know even more every day, I see more dialogue, conversation around people struggling with how to get that balance right and how to justify the investment in brand building, especially when these days you can really quantify the return on performance. People are like asking a lot of questions around, the investment in brand. I believe in it. There's some studies that show the investment in brand over time really augments direct response marketing. But what's your experience in finding that balance, and what's your belief, I guess, yourself in that balance between the return on investing in the brand itself over time?
It's a great question, Geoff. I think it's super important for people working and of course in marketing and building brands to understand the importance of having a long-term vision, right? And how that plays out into building the brand equity. I think it's very easy in today's world to be somehow pulled by the gravity of the short-term return on investment, right? And really think about commercial dividends, or just making sure that your activations really provide value immediately. The thing is, brand equity takes years and years to build, and you build it through consistency, and that consistency can only be built if you have a strong mission and vision in place that can, over time, provide that emotion around it. I do believe that the reason why brands that are strong in equity keep living and can overcome any crisis is because those brands have focused for so many years in making people feel something, right, over just the things that come with it, right? So to your point on, I believe it's extremely important. And let's not forget that both Red Bull and Nike, it took us pretty much 20 to 25 years to build that equity, to build that, let's say, foundation that allow you to start trying different things and go to the edges. So the consistency over time, that distinctiveness that you identified through having a very bold and audacious mission is what allows you to build that equity. I do believe that brands that can do that well and really postpone the pressure of delivering short-term results can eventually be stronger. And you have brands like Apple that did that in the same way, right? As they believed in this idea of thinking differently about products, but more importantly, about the intuitive experience that those products had to provide consumers. And they overcame crisis, changes of management, right? The status quo, or the, let's say, the judgment of the industry in so many cases, but they've built the brand around a strong equity that in most cases has been stronger than the product itself. It's just that now the products have become a living proof of that equity and of that mission that they have to think differently, to innovate and provide genuine experiences to consumers. And I think for us, it's been the same. If we manage to provide inspiration to every athlete around the world, if the inspiration comes first and we make people feel something, and that something is hope, it's joy, it's all those emotions that come with sport, then the product will come secondary, and those products and those ideas will fuel growth eventually. So growth should always be an outcome of what you do and why you're doing it. It shouldn't be that thing you do.
Okay, I couldn't agree more. And I think it is interesting to think about is that consistency over time, that investment over time, that's really important. And that's like thinking about it again, like the idea that a company that makes an energy drink can send someone to space, and everyone's like, oh, of course, that's what Red Bull does, right? Like, it's not, no one's surprised by that. Like, that's like, you kind of expect that from Red Bull. It's like, oh yeah, they're going to own an F1 team. It's like, because people get that, like, that's that building over time, and how powerful that's, that's what the brand allows you to do.
Yeah, and so, let me just build on that, one last comment on that.
Yeah.
The failure is part of the consistency, and it's part of what also builds the equity. Red Bull was created in 1987, and when Red Bull began, people created so much bad reputation around it. Media, everyone was talking about Red Bull as the drug, and this very weird drink that people were having in Austria. But they've built the equity and the values of Red Bull around it. Instead of building a counter narrative, they built from it. And that was pretty smart, extremely audacious and risky at the time by Dietrich Mateschitz. But it is what's made Red Bull what it is today. The bold, audacious, somehow very disruptive brand, right? That is very polarizing, because that's what it is. And the same thing with Nike. Nike created the first shoe with a cleat in 1972, and it was a football cleat. And at the beginning, Nike wasn't great at doing football cleats. We were against Adi, and Adi was dominating the football scene. And it came with a lot of, ups and downs, and people making fun of our products, and we had no skin in the game at the time. And funny enough, Nike built a lot of the equity that it has today on football, or soccer as we know it in the US, but in football, right? Because football gave that global edge to this brand. So definitely the consistency, it comes with some of part of the failure.
Yeah, it's such a good point. It's all part of it, isn't it? It's like, yeah. So, and then the other thing that I think about too is both brands that both, I think, Red Bull and Nike get in common, that a lot of companies struggle with, is a lot of companies right now I see are making the shift to being more customer centered, which is fantastic because it's the right way to think about things. But it's like Nike and Red Bull have done this instinctively for so many years. And Nike, I know we talked a lot about the voice of the athlete, and really hearing that, understanding that, respecting that, and even engaging them in marketing, and everything from product creation to marketing to really it's all these different participative campaigns where it's getting people involved in a meaningful way, and whether it's Red Bull Art of the Can or Nike Training Club, all these are participative services and experiences. Do you think that this approach and this mentality only really applies to hero brands like Red Bull and Nike, which is sometimes I hear that. It's like, oh, yeah, they can do that because they're Red Bull or Nike. But do you think that that's true, or is that something that other brands can put more effort into understanding the customer first and then figuring out what they can help them do and be rather than just what they say to them?
Completely, Geoff. I think it applies to any brand. The one thing that comes before that is, again, your reason of existence. You think about what helped Red Bull, Nike, and even Apple define or be consumer-centric companies is the fact that they have a very clear vision of where they want to go and the impact that they want to have in the world, right? When we said that we want to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world, then we know who we're doing it for. We're doing it for the athlete with an asterisk. It's for everyone. If you have a body, you're an athlete. Therefore, we need to focus every effort of what we do, from designing product to telling stories to creating experiences for the athlete. Same thing for Red Bull, right? When you say gives you wings, you're giving wings to people, you're giving wings to athletes, and therefore you need to focus every effort that you put out there into those athletes. And I think the same about Apple. They focus on the consumer experience and what the consumer feels when they get an iPhone out of the box. And I do believe that applies to every company. I think it just needs to stay grounded on a bigger mission that is going to help you be consistent. Because I've seen a lot, and having worked with multiple multinational companies, is sometimes companies go through let's say the identity crisis of really changing your consumer or how you think about your consumer or your focus, because of course there are generational changes, and that comes with, of course, new ways of thinking, new opportunities, new ways of engaging with consumers. But what shouldn't change is why you exist and how that informs the people you're talking to. So definitely super important.
And how do you think that the role of technology in all this, like in terms of being able to connect closely with your consumer, understand them more, to be more intimate with the people that you're serving at the end of the day? What's your view on technology's role in all this?
Oh, technology, it's becoming more and more the oxygen that somehow helps brand be in the right place at the right moment. I think it's definitely fundamental. I do believe, and this is my personal belief, it's not a company's belief, it's Camilo's belief, is that technology shouldn't become who you are. I see a lot of companies that try to become, a technology company. I think unless you're a technology company, it's really dangerous to let technology be your distinctive advantage, because eventually it will evolve. And you need to stay grounded again on your mission and what makes you distinct and what consumers actually love about you. Technology should be an enabler to actually bring your mission to life in a more seamless and intuitive way. At the end, it's a vehicle for us to create a different kind of experience and relationship about the brand that they already love, or to help them even develop a new relationship, right? Yeah. And I think some companies have struggled because they are born out of a technology and the brand doesn't still have an equity. And I've seen it with a lot of brands that have built their core around the platform, and therefore they suddenly realize they have to go back and find what's their purpose or establish a mission, and then you try to retrofit that into how the technology is helping it. So a little bit of a vague answer, but to say, I think technology is going to be fundamental. We cannot disregard the importance of technology for brands, for companies, because we all live in a digitized world today, right? And technology is making our lives easier. So understanding how brands use technology as a lever, as a platform, let's say as a vehicle to have a more direct relationship with all of us, because we are all people. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge that brands face, is those brands that figure out how to use technology in a non-invasive way to develop still authentic relationships are the brands that are going to win.
Yeah, and using it in service of the purpose, as you say, it's like everything that I've seen and have worked with Nike on in technology is all still in service of that mission, as you say. And it's like, how do we use, using social channels to provide coaching or provide tips, like using, building a Connect training title on Microsoft Xbox, all these things are about still helping people get better using all these new technologies, but it's always in service of that mission in the first place. So, and you've, at Nike, I think you said you've had 4 roles in the short time that you've been there. How many years now? 6 years? 5 years?
6, yeah.
6 years, 4 roles in 6 years. So, which is fast, right? But Nike is a fast-moving company, right? And that's part of its advantage and strength. And one of the things I've always admired is, it's very focused on the future and what's next, and always moving. As much as it respects and pays attention to its history, there's always focus on the future. And I can imagine Red Bull would be similar. Like, so what have you learned from all of the change that you've been through and all the sort of different things that's been asked of you in these different roles? And how's that made you a better leader, do you think?
Great question. I think what I've learned is, I've learned so many things, but I've learned first and foremost that adaptability is one of the most important things for companies in today's world, right? And it's really becoming a hard to find quality because the world's changing so fast. Of course, people want to somehow find comfort and continuity. I've learned to adapt. As a Colombian, I think that's the one thing that has become a little bit of my trademark is I grew up in ever-changing conditions, and I learned how to use those in my favor. And I became someone that always look at the glass half full and always tries to embrace change as an opportunity. So what I've learned is I've learned to adapt to every condition and take change as it comes and just using it as a lever. The second thing, I've learned that empathy and compassion are fundamental to actually be able to adapt, because your environment is never going to be the same. And we as human beings, we're selfish and we look at our own side, but it's important to see where people are coming from and I mean their angle, their point of view. And I think leading with empathy and compassion in today's world is more important than anything else, because that empathy is what's going to allow you to better understand and better adapt to anything that comes your way.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. And I think it's one of those things that until recent years, it's been really undervalued as a leadership trait, I think. And now people are really getting the importance of that to understand and connect with people and to get the most out of a team, right? To understand people's individual motivations and how to communicate different communication styles, how to connect with people, and in order to harness all that energy in a singular direction. Is there anything else that you think about as a leadership principle, or what you aspire to be as a leader? Anything else that you have as values that you try and take to the team?
Yeah, for sure. I can share that. Again, my name starts with a C. I've used sort of like 6 C's that I use for me as guiding principles. And those are character, choices, the conduct, the consistency, the confidence, and the compassion. And I'll tell you is, in a way, it's your character is what will leave an impression on people, right? Is who you really are. And I think a lot of people focus on their reputation, which is what people think you are. And I think there's a very important nuance. So I think I focus on my character, and that is really who I am, and that's grounded on my values, my moral compass, all that. Then choices, as I said, choices will leave a mark. Life is made out of endless choices, and people confuse choices and decisions, but choices add up to form our legacy, a legacy that you leave behind. The choices you make at critical times in your career, in your life, as a parent, as a friend, as a human, those are going to form your legacy. And how you conduct is super important, because your behavior will make an impact, right? And I've always believed that if I act with integrity, that will be remembered. If I treat people with respect, it will be honored for sure. And if I'm trustworthy, it will be recognized somehow. And then if you link conduct with consistency, basically this is having the consistency between what you say and what you do, the consistency between words and actions. And then last is the confidence and the compassion, right? Confidence, it's important, especially as you start to lead teams, as you form your leadership identity, because when you lead with confidence, that will be admired. And of course, it's easier to trust a confident leader. And of course, you want to work with leaders that you trust, right? And of course, confidence comes from competence. You need to prove with results, and those results will build up your confidence, your strengths. Again, going back to the idea, athletes build from their strengths. And last but not least, compassion. I think the compassion that you show others will be highly regarded. And honestly, it grows out of considerate behavior, right? How you act based on your character, your ability to relate and connect to other people, where they're coming from, but especially to the purpose that you have. That's going to help you empower other people's lives, and that compassion is extremely fundamental. So those are kind of like my 6 principles that I've been
amazing.
using.
And I love that you've got those principles. I mean, everybody should have those. Now I'm thinking, what are my principles? I should I need to set some. I might take yours actually, but all right. I think we've just got a couple more minutes. I don't know if there's anything we didn't cover that you want to say. Otherwise, I've got a couple quick fire fun ones for you.
Go, shoot.
All right, starting with favorite athlete. Is it Colombian? I want to say, or have you got who would be your and why? I guess.
It's hard. If I had to pick one, it would be hard. I'll tell you, I have a couple, but I would say Rafa Nadal and Robbie Madison. I'll tell you why. Rafa, I grew up water skiing. No one taught me the right technique or the right approach. I was a self-made athlete, and I broke every bone by trying to improve. I think Rafa, when you compare it to Roger Federer, I love tennis, by the way. Roger is the impeccable tennis player. He is gifted. He has the perfect technique. Rafa has the grit. He's had more dedication than anyone, right? And that is what really inspired me. I think that I love this quote from Jarek Dieter that say that there may be people that have more talent than you, but there's no excuse for anyone to work harder than you do. And I think that that's Rafa mentality. He will always put more hard work into his training, into his game, and that's why it's hard to beat them. And Robbie Madison, I think it's a perfect segue for what we discussed today. He was a freestyle motocrosser that has become an innovator for the sport. He has invented so many waves, and probably the audience knows him. He actually invented a new way of riding waves on a motorcycle. He actually put these paddles on a motorcycle, and he was the first guy to actually ride a motorcycle above water, which is insane to me.
That's crazy.
So yeah, I would say those two.
Those are pretty good choices. I like I think that's those are good criteria. And I think Rafa, I mean, it is inspiring, just like that idea of, and what's really inspiring is when you get an athlete with so much talent who also does the insane level of work, like that commitment, and that combination is just unbeatable. Like if you bring that together, but I think as you say, it's like that one thing you can bring to the table, working harder than anyone else. It's I think that can apply to everything we do. I think we're probably out of time, but I really enjoyed the conversation and having the time with you. Thanks so much for talking today. Appreciate it.
No, thank you, Geoff, and thank you, Kyla. Thank you to the team of Brand Innovators. It was a true honor to be here. Hopefully, it was useful, helpful, and entertaining. But yeah, thank you for having me.
It was awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Camilo. And I love the 6 C's as well. It's got me thinking about what my 6 brand attributes will be, I guess. But also, Camilo, I also loved how you started the session today as well too. And your point about sort of perseverance, resilience, and not quitting. And I think if there's ever a theme for 2020, it definitely begins with those 3 points. And I think also just finally your point about risk taking, if there was ever a brand to learn from, in terms of risk taking, failing, never quitting, I think that's Nike. And so it's been a real privilege to have you on today with Brand Innovators. So thank you very much. And Geoff, great job at moderating as well. Thank you. Looking forward to seeing more great work between you, AKQA, and Nike. So thanks again, guys.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye. So our last session is coming up. We are now joined by Kyle Lazarus. Kyle is the Director of Equity, Digital and Cultural Marketing